to the Festival Live stage. We're in the middle of the market hub here at Cliff Festival this year, so around us there's lots of stalls, lots of people, lots of engagement, lots of things you can find out about ministries and activities. There's even food, so there's sweet stalls, that's even better. There's been an ice cream van all afternoon, Paul. I have only had one, honestly.
If only somebody told me, I wouldn't be here.
Yeah,
I'd be queuing.
There's a queue just down here of ice creams. You've got 10 minutes with us. In a minute, go and get an ice cream. Tell them I've said you can have one. They won't give it you free.
Oh, that's a shame.
Anyway, thank you for joining with us. We've got an hour of conversation. We're going to meet some of the folk who are around on site with us at Cliff Festival over these next few days. So do stay with us. We're live on Facebook, on the Cliff Fest Facebook page, and we're live on YouTube as well. We'll also try and bring you in at different points with your questions or comments. So I hope this is an hour of engaging with you, those of you particularly who are not on site here at Cliff, but are joining us at Festival via the Festival Live stream. So we're really glad you've joined us this afternoon or are watching us on some kind of catch-up facility. I'm initially joined by Paul Morrison. Afternoon, Paul.
Good afternoon.
Tell us a little about who is Paul? Where do you come from? What's your family like? Who are you?
Paul, as you can probably tell, isn't really from these parts. I'm from Belfast.
There's an accent there.
There is a bit. I'm from Belfast originally. I now live in London, and I live in London with my wife, who is a Methodist minister.
Oh, okay.
She's the chaplain at Roehampton University.
Great.
And I've got two children, Andrew and Cara, and less said about them at the minute, the better.
How old are they?
We've got a 9-year-old and a 13-year-old.
Oh, I remember those days well.
Both of them are veer between being 3-year-old toddlers and 50-year-old wise people, and it's
and
fantastic.
You can never tell which is going to be, can you?
No, any question can have a different answer.
Yeah, exactly.
But the most important member of the family, obviously, is Abby the dog.
Of course, always. Dog. I have a dog. Love my dog. I'm missing my dog this weekend. She's in kennels, so we can be here. So she'll be pleased to see us when we see her next week. Paul, warm welcome to you. Paul, you work for JPIT. The Joint Public Issues team. Now, that's right. A team that kind of works in connection with the Baptist Church, the Methodist Church, and the United Reformed Church. Just unpack in a minute or so, what is the Joint Public Issues team?
Well, the Joint Public Issues team is, it's, as you say, it's a cooperation between these three churches, and we kind of face in two directions. We do public issues and issues around society and making society more just, more God-shaped, and we do that both by representing the church towards government and towards people in power, but also in terms of trying to help the church explore those issues and where it is in their context and in the places where they are. And one of the absolute joys of it is that for all of these issues, the three denominations each have a different history and a slightly different way of looking at the world from a God-centered perspective. Yeah. And a secret which I should tell this Methodist gathering, sometimes Baptists have great ideas that we would never get. And it's just wondrous when you can see something you would never have seen before.
That's amazing.
It's a brilliant way to work in cooperation and partnership.
I know you particularly work for the Methodist Church in that context, right. And we'll come back to that in just a minute. But a couple of things you've just said spark my thought processes. So how do you you said you face two ways, and you kind of represent the church to government, and how does that happen? How do you do that? What practically can you do to enable that God-shaped kind of justice-centered community to be heard by government?
There's a number of ways in which we do it. I think I'll just mention a couple. So we do reports around particular policy issues. So things that the last one we did was around debt, and that came from doing lots of focus groups with ministers and community leaders around the country over COVID. And one of the things they were coming back to us saying was that the people who were struggling, they weren't able to pay their bills because of the circumstances of COVID. So we can then do some research and we can make sure that the facts and figures are right and represent that. And we end up talking to members of the Lords, we end up talking to government ministers, presenting that and asking for solutions to those problems. One of the other things we do is we've got two interns shared with members of the House of Commons. Yeah. So one with a Labour MP, one with a Conservative MP. And again, it's about building relationships and it's about seeing how politics works and hopefully those interns and the people that are around will see that church and God has something to say in this space.
Are
and be able
those
to do it for the rest of
MPs
their life.
Christian MPs?
Yes.
Yeah. So they understand the church. Well,
Who understands the church?
Okay. How long have we got? That's yeah. Okay. Fine. Fair point. But they're Christian MPs.
They are very much so. Yes.
Great. So, Paul, tell me a bit about your particular work at the moment. What are you focused on? What are you passionate about?
So the thing that I have done for quite a long time for JPIT is work around poverty and inequality. Now, for the last 10 years, the amount poverty has changed in the UK and has changed in a huge way. So the numbers have slowly increased. There's about 14.6 million people experience poverty in the UK, which is an extraordinarily high number.
Is that increased on recent years?
Yeah. So
Okay.
about 13.5 million, so about 1 million over the last decade. But the big trend is that some people have fallen into destitution. There was very little in 2010.
Okay.
2015, you start to see 1.5 million people in destitution. When you get to 2020, it's 2.5 million people, 1 million children, experiencing destitution. And that means the definition is they regularly don't have enough money, so they can't eat, can't have a roof over their head, or sanitation, so essentially being able to wash. And that is an extraordinary thing in a country which actually got wealthier over that period. And if that is not an injustice that Christians should be crying out about and finding ways to cry about, I don't know what is.
They are, well, they're unbelievable statistics, aren't they? And a lot of that, for those of us that live comfortably, and I put myself in that place, we don't always see those statistics lived out before us. How does that play out, Paul? Why is that hidden?
I think one of sort of the other things I do outside of work is I'm a director at Trussell Trust.
Okay.
So, and we have seen that same pattern. We start the decade serving about 30,000 people. Yeah. It's 3 million this year. 3 million. And the reason why you don't see it is that in our society, and I think in our churches, being poor is shameful. And people hide it. And when you sit in a food bank session and you sit and have a cup of tea, the poor don't look different. The poor don't come from the same places as everyone else. And you wouldn't notice, and they wouldn't want you to notice. Yeah. And the real thing that the church has that nobody else does is to sit down and to have that cup of tea and listen to those stories. And for me, that's the most transformative thing we can do as a church, is to listen to those stories and represent them and amplify them and be informed by them and be changed by them. Because the experience of poverty is something that also shows us something about the experience, about who God is. And if we aren't listening to those stories, we're missing a whole swathe of what God is and what God has to teach us too.
You're absolutely right, and telling the stories is really important, because telling the stories actually brings the stories to the fore and lives, because then it becomes less about statistics and more about people. Your role, of course, is representing that to government. How does government hear that? And how do they respond?
I could make some jokes, but straightforwardly, over the past decade, the major driving factor has been government policy. If you experience poverty in the UK, it's quite likely you're affected by something called the two-child rule, which says that benefits are only given for the first two children, so the third children doesn't get any benefits. And maybe that sounds fair to you, but a friend of mine had 3 children, and he had a heart attack, and he died. One of those children, the benefit system ignores. 2 of those children, it doesn't. How is that fair? How is that right? How is it right that we as a nation have chosen to ignore those children? And that's why half of them experience half of children in those large families experience poverty. That is an injustice, and that's the sort of injustice I think the church should be screaming about, and that's what we do.
Paul, thank you for helping us to scream.
Thank you.
Thank you for raising the issues and keep doing that. And we are proud of the work of JPIT as the Methodist Church, and I guess the Baptist Church would say the same, and the United Reformed Church would say the same. We're proud of the work JPIT does in our name, because it does challenge injustice and it does speak out. We are, if we're not prophetic, what are we? If we're not speaking the prophetic voice into our government systems, into our communities, what are we about? So thank you for just reminding us of that, and thank you for sharing this afternoon. God's blessing on you. Thank you so much for your time. Thanks, Paul.
Thank you.
Stay tuned. We're coming back in just a moment. So just we're going to turn around on the seats. Here's the sting, just so we can get Paul out of one seat and somebody else in. Let's go. Thanks, Luke. Blimey, that was a quick change. The seat's nice and warm there, Mpendula, because Paul's been keeping it warm for you. Yeah. Hi. So, Mpendula, am I saying that correct?
Yes, you're saying it right.
Great.
Yes.
Welcome to Cliff Festival.
Thank you. Thank
Welcome to this amazing... This is the centre of the universe you've now found yourself in.
It's for the second time.
For the second time. Mpendula, we met some years ago in Durban.
Yes.
Just introduce yourself a little bit. Tell us who you are and tell us what you do, if that's okay.
Okay. My name is Mpendula Nyembe. I come from South Africa, in Durban, the south coast of South Africa. Basically, I work for an organization called Umthombo Street Children, and we are basically catering for the needs of children and young people that find themselves stranded in the street. We try to help them and find out what is really the issues that have brought them to the street, and if things are possible, reintegrate them back to their families or communities, or we set them up for independent living.
So how long's the project been running?
The project has been running officially for over 20 years. And we've been going through changes because the street conditions are changing. The context of the streets are changing over the period of time, yes.
So just unpack that for me. You say the issues are changing, the conditions of the street are changing. For better, for worse? What are the issues you're facing?
You can say both.
Okay.
For better, for younger children that are now able to receive social grant from government, and also the expanded program in the school nutrition program. So we have seen less and less children of under 18 years of age coming to the streets, roaming the street by themselves. So they are now kept in schools. But for those that are older, we are seeing above 18, let's say above 16, coming into the street as well, mainly because of school dropouts, high rates, as well as teenage pregnancy. And most of them are exposed to substance misuse. So it has become worse for the older children that we find them on the streets.
So are you able to give us any statistics about, particularly in Durban, the number of children on the streets?
It is estimated that the children on the street in Durban, they are slightly above 3,000, below the ages of 18. Above the ages of 18, you talk about almost about 10,000, between 18 to 35 young people.
3,000
Yes,
children
yeah.
Under 18 on the street?
Under 18, yes, yeah.
So Umthombo is an organisation that seeks to work. Just tell us a little bit about what you do. What's a daily rhythm of life from Umthombo?
Yes, the daily rhythm of life at Umthombo is that we've got two programs. The first program is called our psychosocial intervention, where we've got a team of social workers that go actively in the street to identify new kids on the streets, establish relationship and strengthen relationship with the aim of reintegrating back them to their families or societies. That process may take anything between a day to 6 months to a year to 2 years, depending on the nature of issues that each and every child is bringing forth. Then the second element of our program is the development work, where we focus on early intervention and prevention. With that, we go to communities, work with communities, schools, civil societies, where we identify at-risk children that might be at risk to come to the street, then we engage with them.
One of the most memorable moments for me over the last few years is walking with you to just meet kids on the street in Durban. We went into bushes and found children you had relationship with, people you were getting to know, and it was just a really moving to see how they responded to you and the love and the care that you were bringing, and then seeing them begin to engage with the work and the project. Just tell us a little bit about some of the success stories you've had over the years.
Yeah. Over the years, through the work that we've been doing, we've been developing and redeveloping our work based on the context that we find ourselves. And our success lately, it's finding a breakthrough working with young mothers and young girls that find themselves stranded in the street. Most of those young girls are facing lots of abuse. They live under very repressive conditions, and it's hard to reach them because going back at home might not be a solution for them. So our only hope is to set them up for independent, and once we set them for independent, they can start rebuilding their lives on themselves. And most of those are young mothers with babies and toddlers. So our successes over the past 3 years, we have reintegrated about 15 young girls and young mothers into independent living project, as opposed to the years prior that. The past 2 years, we have seen enormous increase in the work that how we work with girls are responsive, and we are able to set them up for independent living.
When we were there, we travelled to a number of churches together. We went to one of the training centres for the Methodist Church in South Africa.
Yes.
And you yourself are a person of faith.
Yes.
A Methodist by background.
Yes.
So how do you see the church connecting with projects like yours? How can the church, both locally in South Africa, but also how can we're kind of thousands of miles from you, how can we support what you do on the ground in Durban?
The work around street-connected children and young people, it's quite an intense work. It involves a lot of work that needs to be undertaken, both in terms of the human resources, but as well as financial resources and material resources. Being a person of faith, I believe that the church has got a role to play, because if we do leave children unattended, who else will take care of those kids? We need to provide as much as love and nourishing to those children at an early stage. So organizations like Umthombo are trying to reach out, and with the help and support of the churches around in South Africa, in our local context in Durban, and internationally, can support the work by providing various resources, be it bringing in volunteers to be exposed with expertise, so that we can start defining how we find ways to work with children moving forward, be it in financial resources that they can contribute to pay for professional services that we provide for the children living on the streets.
Do you have a website folk can look at?
Yes, we do have a website, www.umthombo.org.
How do you now? Because we have a children's drink here that sounds very similar.
Yes. Oh.
I think, was it called Umbongo?
Umbongo.
Something like that. So it sounds very. Umbongo is a children's drink here in the UK,
yeah.
so we need to be really careful.
Yes.
So Umthombo, how are we spelling that?
You spell Umthombo, it's UMTHOMBO.
UMTHOMBO.
Umthombo.org.za. ORG.za.
ZA.
Yes. Thank you.
Okay, and so folk online, just make sure you take a note of that. If you want to find out more about the work of Umthombo, do go onto the website. There'll be lots of stories on there, lots of opportunities. What's next for you? Why are you here in the UK? What are you doing? Where have you been? Where are you going? I'm really interested. You can just listen into this bit of conversation, because we haven't had a chance to catch up yet. So
yes. The past 14 years has been great. We arrived here...
You've been here for 14 years?
For 14 days.
14 days?
14
I thought you said
yes.
14 years. I think you blimey.
Sort of that. It's about 14 days ago when we arrived. We've been meeting with various supporters of Umthombo through our founder, partner, Amos Trust. And it was just engagement and bringing ourselves up to speed, because there's been this connect through COVID that has happened, and lots of partners and supporters wanted to hear firsthand what is it we're still doing at Umthombo. Many of the NGOs in the southern region of Africa have closed down because of COVID, but we tried. Our level best, we've survived. So it was about reconnecting and reigniting the flame again, that Umthombo is still there, and we're still working with kids, and kids really value the service and the support that they receive from abroad. And
that's great. And tonight you'll be sharing a little bit of what you've been sharing this afternoon on the main stage, just to kind of... we're hearing today from two projects, the Archer Project, and we'll hear from them in a minute here, but also on stage tonight, who deal with homeless folk here in Sheffield. And we're hearing your story tonight of you working with the street children in Durban, just recognising the stories go right around the world. Poverty isn't something we talk about just in South Africa, it's here.
Yes.
And as people of faith, as Paul was just telling us a minute ago, it's our responsibility to cry out.
To cry out.
And not just to cry, but to act.
To act, yes.
So how can I guess I know the answer to this, and I'm being told we need to wrap up our conversation. I'm guessing the answer to this question is we can pray for you and we can financially support you. Are they the two things that we can do to support you?
Those are the main two important things for us to survive, and also to reach out with love to the children that we work with.
Please do. Can we just say thank you, a massive thank you to Mpendule just for spending some time. It's been great to have you with us. And there are folk listening online just wanting to bless you and to encourage you. Please do go to the website. We'll add that into the notes on the YouTube page and here on Facebook, umtombo.org.za. Do make sure you do that and find out more. Mpendule, it's been great to have a conversation with you. We look forward to seeing you tonight on the platform. So if you are watching Celebration tonight, you'll hear that story again. But don't tune out because of that, because it's worth hearing twice. Great. Thanks, Mpendule.
Thank you, Ash.
Enjoy the rest of your day with us.
Thank you.
Well, we have changed around. The seat, it's literally the hot seat this afternoon, Ruth, as different bottoms have warmed it up for you. Julia, just while we're here, before we get into conversation with Ruth, you might be able to hear other noises around while we have conversation, because there are bands playing, there's been a brass band playing, there's now another band on. So we're in the kind of literally in the heart of festival this afternoon. Are we able to turn the camera around and just have a look at the different stalls that we are with? How do we do that? How's this going to happen, Luke? Are we there? Okay, so they can see the other stalls now, yeah? Great. Just to how you were in the middle of this marketplace, we've got the Berry Bunch. Give us a wave, Berry Bunch. There we are. Family that work with children and families and encourage churches to engage with families. If you want to find out more about the Berry Bunch, they've got a website. We've got the Met stand with us, Methodist Evangelicals Together. So there they. I'm sure they've got there it is, methodistevangelicals.org.uk. We've got some art. I can't remember the name. Harlequin Arts, I think, are with us down here. The Fun for Human Need, Take Time Meditations. Around the corner, there's loads of stuff going on. If you're local, nearby, just pop in and come and have a look and see all these guys. But right now, I'm with Ruth Valerio. Ruth, good afternoon.
Hello, good to be with you.
Welcome to Cliff College. Is this your first time at Cliff College?
No, I've been a few times.
Have you?
I've taught on the MA.
You
have.
have.
Done environmental ethics on one of the MA courses before.
What we tell everybody is it's always sunny as shining, always at Cliff College. Beautiful today. It's an amazing weather,
gorgeous.
this festival.
I have been, though, when there's been snow on the
We
fields.
don't admit that.
So,
we
no,
don't
that's
admit
also
rain or
beautiful.
snow ever in the Peak District. It's always sunny, just like this. Ruth, you're with us this weekend to kind of lead our Bible study, to kind of get us thinking about the theme of Eden Restored and to kind of look at Scripture and help us just to unpack some of that. But before we get into that, the main purpose of a conversation is to get to know you a little bit. The person who's leading our Bible study. Who is, if I was just to say, if somebody said to me, who's Ruth Valerio, how would you answer the question?
Well, I guess my title, if you kind of want to go from that perspective,
Okay.
is I'm one of the directors at Tear Fund. So work-wise, very involved, and life-wise, very involved in issues of global poverty and environmental care. I live down on the south coast with my family. I've got two daughters, two growing up daughters.
How old are they?
They're 23 and 19.
Oh, no children in the house anymore.
No,
Yeah.
I know, no children.
When you get those forms where it says any dependents in the house,
Yeah.
you tick no now.
Oh, well, I've still got one.
Okay. Oh, have you?
Who's a dependent.
Okay.
Yeah, at uni.
Oh,
So,
okay, they're still at fine.
Yeah.
What are they studying?
History and politics.
Of course. Carry on. Sorry, I interrupted.
Yeah, no, that's probably it. That's who I am.
It says on my notes that you're a canon theologian
Oh, yes, I
at
am one of
Rochester
those.
Cathedral. What on earth is a canon theologian?
Yeah, who knows?
I don't know.
It's an honorary position that was given to. I'm not Anglican, but it's an honorary position that was given to me at Rochester Cathedral, and it's an invitation for me to come in and be part of the life of the cathedral and help them to reflect theologically on who they are and what they do as a cathedral. So I actually, you're installed is what it's called.
Okay.
And I was installed as canon theologian just 2 weeks before COVID started. So then we had a few years of me not really being able to engage. but now I'm much more engaged with them. So I don't live in Rochester, but I take part in their life. I go over and join them as the staff as I can, lead retreats for them, and just try and engage them. Yeah, it's a real privilege to be doing that.
I always wondered what a canon theologian does. Now we know all about it. It also says here that you are part of the 24/7 prayer network.
Yeah.
That's quite a varied kind of portfolio.
Isn't it? I know.
It's an amazing, from environmentalist to canon theologian in an Anglican cathedral to part of the 24/7 prayer network.
Yeah.
How does all that hold together?
I guess it holds together because first and foremost, I'm a Christian. I'm a follower of Jesus rather than a denomination as such. So my church background is charismatic. That's where I feel most at home. The church that I'm from was part of the Pioneer Network, and we're now, as you say, part of the 24/7 prayer church network. And actually, we're the church where that network started.
Okay.
So it kind of made sense. We've got a lot of connections with them. But then my work has taken me into all sorts of denominations. I've done lots with the Methodist Church, lots with the Anglicans, with Catholics, with New Church, so I kind of cross all over the boundaries, which is such a nice thing.
It says here on my notes about you, I don't know where they've got these from, but I've got a whole set of notes.
They've done some good research.
It says, she enjoys living sustainably, practicing what she preaches. What does that mean for Ruth and the family?
Yeah.
I'd love to know what that actually means day in, day out.
I probably ought to say I enjoy trying to live sustainably and trying to practice what I preach, because I'm far from perfect. But it's about trying to think of how does what I do impact other people and the wider natural world. So it might be about thinking about my food, the kind of, the food that I eat. Where does it come from? What have been the inputs? Who has grown it or reared it if I choose to eat meat. Might be thinking about my transport. How do I get about? What kind of vehicle do I use if I have a vehicle? Do I fly? So thinking about how I travel. My energy, where does the energy in my house come from? Waste, plastic, thinking about reducing that. So it's really being aware that my everyday actions have an impact because we are part of a globalized society. So my everyday impacts have an impact for good or for bad on other people and other places. And I have a choice as to whether those impacts are going to be good or going to be bad.
So we've got folk listening in on Facebook and on YouTube, engaging with our conversation, sitting there thinking, where do I start with that? If I want to start thinking about being sustainable, I want to start taking seriously some of these issues. I'm hearing themes around Eden Restored and hearing the challenge on me as an individual disciple to try and live in a way that honours this creation in which God has planted us in. Where do I start, Ruth? Where would you suggest somebody starts?
I would suggest someone starts by getting a bit of knowledge. And one of the places, and this is a shameless plug, but one of the places is to get hold of L is for Lifestyle, Christian living that doesn't cost the earth, because that will really help people get some knowledge and then see some steps that they can take. Very practically, I would look at food, energy, waste, i.e. plastic, and travel. So just have a think about what's one thing that I could do in each of those areas: food, energy, waste, plastic, and travel. And if you want to boil it down to one thing, the biggest thing that we can do is to reduce the amount of meat and dairy in our diet. So I'm not saying everybody has to go vegetarian or vegan, but I'm talking about reducing. So flipping our diet on its head so that we eat a predominantly vegetable and grain-based diet with a little bit of meat and some dairy if we want, but the bulk of our diet is, so, we maybe have meat once or twice a week rather than for every
And that
meal.
is, for some of us, that's really hard.
Yeah.
Being blunt. And I know that's, I've been challenged with that statement as somebody who is a lover of red meat.
Yeah, well, me too.
Absolute lover.
Yeah.
We had to go, let's take this really simply and carefully.
Yeah.
And initially, we just had one day when we cut meat out.
Yeah.
We had to go, I just can't feel like I can't do this.
Yeah.
And so we did one day. And so one day a week, we will consciously make sure we do not. And then that slowly, when you recognise, actually, this wasn't that bad, being
Yeah,
blunt.
yeah.
If we can find creative meals that are tasty and fun and nice and enjoyable, we started to kind of think more creatively about that. And at college, we're starting to ask those questions as well about how much meat is in our
That's
menus.
great.
But it's,
and one of my mottos is many little steps in the right direction. So
Yeah.
sometimes it
Yeah.
can feel huge, which is why I'm saying this isn't about, if we look at that particular example, this isn't about going vegetarian, but this is about reducing and so taking steps. On a really physical thing, it's also about the microbes in our gut. So they're kind of, your microbes are trained to love meat. As you change the diet, you'll get different microbes that send different signals to your brain, and you'll find yourself wanting meat a bit less. It's a funny thing,
Okay.
and so you'll gradually change. That's very simplistic, in case anybody more sophisticated is listening.
They're just messaging
But
me
it
now.
but it kind of works along those lines.
Ruth, thank you so much. I'm being told we need to kind of move on. But thank you for being with us. For those that are not yet aware, are just tuning in and finding us, Ruth's with us all weekend. Each morning she's leading our Bible study at 10 a.m. That is streamed both on our Facebook page and on the YouTube page. So as far as Festival Live is, you can tune in each morning and hear the journey. If you've not heard this morning, might be worth kind of going back, having a look at this morning's Bible study ready for tomorrow, because we're kind of following a theme that journeys through. So they're not totally standalone. There will be a journey through. So do go to this morning's if you've not already seen it. But Ruth, thank you so much for taking time
Thank
to
you.
get to know you a little bit more, and Canon, theologian,
Yes,
Ruth
Canon
Valerio.
Doctor, if
Canon
you
Doctor,
really
sorry,
want.
let's get it right. Canon Doctor Theologian Ruth Valerio, who is the author of L is for Lifestyle.
Brilliant.
The book that's going to really help you. Thank you for your time. Thanks so
Great,
much.
thanks, Ash.
Thank you. We are literally changing people around in seconds. We have a 25-second sting that gives us a chance to get somebody out of the hot seat and somebody else into the hot seat. Again, thank you for staying with us. And actually, the numbers have stayed right the way through in the conversations. We're obviously having some very interesting conversations this afternoon, so make sure you live up to that, Tim. Thank you for joining us. Again, just for you aware, we're meeting at the Festival Live stage, which is in the middle of the marketplace, the Market Hub. It's gone a bit quiet. The sun's out here. Everyone doesn't want to be in a tent, I don't think, this afternoon, because there's lots going on our Orchard stage and on our live stage, and there's ice cream vans. I fancy an ice cream. If anybody's watching and fancies grabbing me an ice cream, that would be great. Marvellous.
Somebody brought me an ice cream.
You're highly honoured.
Oh, it's wonderful.
How have you got an ice cream? That's what I want to know. Why haven't I got an ice cream? So you don't post one. If you're online a long way away, don't post. I'm not sure it's going to travel well in the post. Not in this weather, anyway. Tim, welcome to Cliff College. Welcome to Festival. You've come as one of our market stall holders this weekend. One of the projects that's kind of invested in Festival this year, and one of our partner projects, the Archer Project. Each year at Festival, we want to make sure we don't just do navel gazing at Festival. Festival is always about how do we as disciples, how do we as Christians, how do we as Christian families make a difference in the places in which we find ourselves. So right the way through, from our youngest venue to our oldest venue, we want to be asking the questions, actually, what can we do that makes a difference in our communities? Not just do head stuff, but do some real heart and engagement stuff. So, Tim, you work for the Archer Project, or represent the Archer Project. Tell us a bit about you, first of all. Who is Tim?
I'm Tim. I'm the Chief Executive of the Archer Project.
CEO, very good.
And I've worked for the Archer Project for 18 years. The Archer Project is 33 years old, really. Like many things around homelessness, it came into being because as a city, Sheffield realised that it was in decline and more people were moving to the streets. And so there's quite a lot of activities at the end of the 80s, early 90s. And we built on that gradually over those years to make sure that we provide not just a place of emotional hope, but really practical hope for people who find themselves homeless.
It's really difficult, isn't it, for us sitting here in the middle of a beautiful place.
Yeah.
The sun's shining, we all look happy, we're smiling away. But we've heard some serious stories in this last half hour or so. We've heard from Paul Morrison, who's talked about over 1 million children, not just in poverty, but destitute in the UK. Yeah. They are heartbreaking statistics. We've heard from Mpendulo, who's working in Durban. Yeah. Actually, we can kind of go, that's the other side of the world. We can give a bit of money and we can just acknowledge it's the other side of the world. But Sheffield, you're less than 20 minutes from where we're sat.
Yes.
And we can't ignore on our doorstep some of the serious issues that we face.
And actually there's rural homelessness as well, we know that.
Yeah, there is.
So even much more locally. And in any of our cities that's the case. And there are links, of course, between those things. So when we look at child poverty now, we know that it's from largely childhood trauma that our street populations come.
You say childhood trauma?
Yeah.
What does that mean? For those that are sitting there, I don't quite know what that means.
So it's things that children experience normally in deprivation of some kind or other, emotional, spiritual, physical deprivation. So if I tell a quick story. So somebody told their story last year in the exhibition, and they spoke about in their home, her first memories of her mum and dad eating the middle of the pizza and the children having the crust as the outside of the pizza. And mum and dad going out, and their babysitter was a sex worker. And so older brother watches what the sex worker does when everybody's gone to bed, and that becomes the model for lifestyle in the home. So in that place of deprivation, we have those awful things happening that then starts to play in people's minds and help them. People then start to think about, how do I survive this? So we manage from that emotional part of our brain. How do we get out of this? How do we prevent it happening? And that starts to warp the way we think and take part in society. It ruins our relationships and so on. Now, we know that's the group of people who eventually, or from that group of people, we have our street populations. And that's one of the things we really, if we're wanting to look at what can we do, it's for us to look at homeless populations and to understand them differently. So we still have this issue in British society where we have huge sympathy for people who might be on the street, but we also think they must have done something to get there, and they surely could do something to get themselves away from the street. But really what we're talking about is emotional healing, the ability to form trusting relationships when you have no idea what a trusting relationship looks like, or the ability to manage different aspects of life when you've never had a good example of what managing those aspects of life actually looks like. So in the same way we've had a journey, I guess, in society which has helped us to start to take mental health seriously. Somebody isn't just a slice short of a loaf. There are actually real mental health issues there that we can address and we can have compassion with. And compassion different from sympathy in that, yes, we may feel sorry, but we realise we can do something. We can change the way we think and we can change the way we respond. And actually that, with us as a project, practically that means we can do things that allows people to belong and allows people to make progress. So the shirt I'm wearing is an example of people move on. We've got a little printing business, and that's really about how do people who have been homeless start to move back into full society with a settled home, relationships, and the chance of employment and things like that. And actually belonging to a team, a work team, producing something, selling something, taking a wage. It's just incredible for the soul as well as the wallet, really.
I think I did. Did I read that you'd spent a few days sleeping outside?
Last year, I did a 14-night sleep out. I've worked for the charity for 18 years, and I've never, I know loads of stories, I know all the theory, but I've never spent that long on the street, and it was an emotional nightmare.
Why do you say that?
Because the practicalities, I thought, it's 14 days, I can get over that. But actually, living in that space where you have nothing to do during the day, and you've got the same clothes on 14 days after you started, and you start to think of yourself negatively and think of yourself distanced from the people around you, you start to enter that space of what it means to feel and to be excluded.
Tim, if there's one thing you could say, we've got some folk watching on here,
Yeah.
Trying to understand how does this happen in Sheffield.
Yeah.
What would you say to them about what they can do to make a difference? Not just in Sheffield, but actually wherever they find themselves, because some will be all over the country.
Yeah. One of the major things is to start to think about homeless people differently. But also, we know we can talk to people on the street and we can say hello. And actually being acknowledged on the street is a really, really important thing. So if you're passing somebody, say hello. You don't have to give money. You may want to give drinks and things like that. Just say hello. Make people feel as though they're still part of life.
Perfect. Now, do you know what's happened while we've been on here?
Haven't
Somebody
got a clue.
has brought me an ice cream. I have. Look at this. Because I was feeling sorry for myself and said I wanted an ice cream.
Is that to share?
No. You've had one. You admitted. You admitted on this camera that you had one. Someone had brought you one. And I now have an ice cream. So I don't know who it was who brought me an ice cream. But I'm going to now ask for some other things, because seemingly, if I read Mercedes-Benz, do you think, is this going to work? Or chocolate cake? Or what's going to happen now? This is going to be it. What do you fancy, Tim? I'm going to ask for it online. What do you really need? So, Tim,
a cool box.
well, an ice cube for the back of my neck would be
right.
great.
Yeah,
That would be superb. Tim,
Yeah.
thank you so much. I'm going to have to. I think I'm chatting to a climate, Christian Climate Action in a minute. They're going to have to chat to me whilst eating an ice cream. So I do apologise. Just looking at the young lady who's coming to have a conversation. So I'm sorry about that, but here we go. Thank you so much, Tim, for being with us. Thank you for the project. I know we're going to hear a bit more of you on stage tonight as well. And we're going to have those two conversations: Mpendulo and the work he does in South Africa, and then right here in Sheffield, the work that you're doing. So be blessed. Have a great rest of your day. Thanks.
Pleasure.
Welcome back. Blimey, I got a bit of ice cream in my mouth then. Melanie, welcome. I'm sorry I'm going to eat an ice cream as we talk. I hope you don't mind.
You eat your ice cream.
If I hold this for the next 20 minutes while I have conversation, it's going to just melt. And
We wouldn't want to waste it, would we?
No, exactly. That would be a terrible thing. Food waste is a terrible thing.
Yeah.
So, Melanie, just tell us about you. Who are you? Where do you live? What's family look like for you? Tell us a bit about Melanie.
So I live in London, and I came up yesterday evening to this beautiful bit of Derbyshire.
Amazing, isn't it?
I was absolutely stunned about how gorgeous it has been.
We're very jealous of our site. We love it.
Yeah. I live in London with my husband and two of my 4 children. I've lived in London all my adult life, but you can probably guess my roots are not actually in London or in the UK.
So where are the roots?
My family are from India, but I was actually born in Kenya, in Africa.
Okay.
And I grew up in a small chain of islands in the Western Pacific, the Solomon Islands.
Amazing.
And eventually moved to Hong Kong before coming to London.
That's a very interesting route and journey, isn't it?
It is, but the one thing that really ties those first 3 places together is they're all really the people there are vulnerable to climate change, aren't they? You know, in India, in the Pacific, in Africa, it's the front line.
So you're one of our marketplace people this weekend?
No, I'm not actually, because the idea of handling a stall all by myself would have meant that I couldn't enjoy the rest of your wonderful festival.
Superb. So tell us about Christian Climate Action. Tell us about what work you do, how you challenge, how you engage churches, how churches can respond.
So we're a direct action organisation.
Yeah.
We believe that one of the things about the climate crisis is that this is a structural societal problem. So it's really, really important that we all do our bit. We try and change our own lifestyles. But I think that that's never going to be enough. Until the government acts to put a framework around that enables all those actions to actually be effective, we're going to be in a position where the CO2 in the atmosphere is continuing, where biodiversity loss is continuing. We really have to do something as a global society, but also as a country. So the aim of Christian Climate Action is to enable Christians to use their prophetic voice and to take direct action. And that means we organize things on the streets, we organize prayer protests, we'll organize pilgrimages that highlight these issues. And then we also take more disruptive action, because we think that sometimes that is necessary to keep this in the public eye. And
unpack that for me, Melanie. When you say destructive.
Disruptive.
Disruptive.
Not destructive, we hope, but disruptive. So sometimes we have to disrupt business as usual. And occasionally that means the public at large, but often it will mean taking this to businesses. Sometimes actually sort of going into their premises and making a big point and refusing to leave. That sort of thing is quite disruptive to business. Yeah. But if you're talking to, say, Barclays, which are one of the biggest funders of climate destruction in the UK, you have to make that point both to them and to their customers. And it's too easy for people to ignore you, to turn away from this sort of thing, if you don't, kind of put it in their face. It's called a dilemma action. You may hate us for doing it, but at least you think about it and you take a stance. I personally, along with other people in Christian Climate Action, think that this is a gospel arc. In fact, it's an arc of the Bible, this whole idea of prophetic voice and being disruptive, of speaking truth to power in pursuit of God's justice is something that we're called to.
Wow. I'm just kind of thinking through people listening at home going, how do I, in my context, how can I be disruptive? How do I, as an individual Christian living in Little Sudworth, in a little Methodist chapel, how can I be disruptive, Melanie?
So the idea of disruption is not disruption for its own sake. Yeah. It's to give people a message and to make it very hard for people to ignore that message. And I think that's what we're called to do. So if you don't live in a big city, that can be more difficult. I think you can travel to join in bigger actions. We've recently had a huge action in London, which attracted people from all over the country, as far away as Scotland. And at one point, we had sort of 14,000 Christians in a church near Waterloo. And then they had a big procession past the Shell building where we stopped and prayed and sang Amazing Grace, and then walked into Parliament Square. You can come and join those sorts of things. You can organise your own protest where your centre of power might be. It might be your local council. You might want to do a prayer vigil outside your local council or outside your MP's office to make this point that actually this is something that politicians should be taking very, very seriously.
Absolutely. Talking about climate action, you talked about the two kind of fold nature of that, and that we do need to, as individuals, begin to take seriously our decisions, the things that we do locally that can make a difference, and you recognise that in itself is not going to change everything, but we do have to look at ourselves. We can't challenge the power bases unless we're willing to actually change who we are and how we live locally. For those that are watching on and listening into this conversation, thinking about how they can change some of their own actions, what would be the things you would say to us as individuals trying to live out what it means to be Christian in our communities? What are the things you think we should be doing and the decisions we should be taking day in, day out that can have a difference?
So I think at fundamental core, we are called to love God, and this whole creation is God's gift to us. So the first thing we have to do is to think about how we use that. How do we shop? How do we buy things? Do we fly on holiday? Those are all decisions that affect the whole planet. They affect carbon emissions. And there are lots of organizations, and Green Christian, for instance, is here with a table that will help you do that. And then I think we're also called to love our neighbour as ourselves. And these people that I talked about in the Global South, people in Africa and the Pacific and India, they need us to be proactive in this way, because what they really need, as well as finances to help them, is technology to adapt and mitigate. And we need to pressure organizations to be able to provide them to them, without cost, because they can't afford it. We need reparations, so loss and damage for the harm that's happening to their livelihoods. And all those things you can do as an individual. You can write to your MP, you can do all those are not the things that Christian Climate Action do. We will help you take the next step. But there are plenty of organisations, there's sort of Flight Free, who will help you take those personal actions. And I would definitely encourage you to do that, because that's the first step. But the second step is then to be there as public Christian witness.
My final question to you is, how do folk engage with Christian Climate Action? How do they find out more about your work, about where you're going to be next, how they can get involved? How do they do that?
So if you're at the festival, we've got workshop tomorrow at 1 o'clock in Seminar Room 1.
Perfect.
Where we're going to be talking about how you can take this sort of action. But our website is christianclimateaction.org. We run it as one word.
Yeah.
And you can find pretty much everything we do is on there. And you can join us in prayer every morning online, so you can do that from wherever you are. You can sign up to our newsletter, which tells you about the actions that we're doing. We're going to be developing a program of pilgrimage right across the country, that pilgrimage is also protest. You can develop these ideas yourself, and we will help you do that.
Superb, Melanie. Thank you so much for just inspiring us and making us think that I'm just wrestling with that whole disruptive nature of being Christian, being disruptive, because Jesus was disruptive.
He was.
He was disruptive.
A rebel. Look at his radicalizing the people of Galilee before he walked into Jerusalem and cleansed the temple.
Yeah.
I mean, that is an act of civil disobedience that we need to take seriously.
Yeah. We have those images, don't we, or our Sunday school image of Jesus, meek and mild, and actually that was not who the Saviour was. He was someone who really challenged power, spoke to power, and challenged those root issues.
And he helped people who were marginalised and oppressed, and he did it both by healing them, but also by speaking up for them.
Amazing. Melanie, thank you so much. So ChristianClimateAction.org.
Yes.
If you want to know more about Melanie and all the work that they're doing as an organisation and want to get involved, then do sign up on the website and get involved. We do need to be involved. We've talked a lot this afternoon about the need for the church to be a prophetic voice. We've talked about injustice so much, from the injustice against little children right the way through to the injustice against the planet.
And the climate crisis underlies it all. All those problems will be made so much worse as we go into crisis.
Yeah. Melanie, thank you so much. Be blessed. We're going to have one more sting. Well, thank you so much for being with us for this last hour. Boy, we've had some interesting conversations, some amazing projects we've heard from, amazing ways for you to be involved and to bring change and to be a prophetic voice, and not just locally, but a voice that kind of challenges the power bases across the UK and around the world. So just find out how you can be involved. But also we've heard lots of things about how we can make our own first steps as Christians in our communities and our locations, the things that we can do, the choices that we can make, the decisions that we can make that will make a difference. So thank you for joining us. Thank you for being with us. We're going to be back a little bit later. Of course, we've got celebration tonight at 7 p.m. So make sure you join us tonight. We've got Dowd Nasser with us, who's going to be sharing some of his story in conversation. He's the winner of the World Methodist Peace Award, works at the Tent of Nations in Bethlehem. Again, talks about disruption and how disruption kind of brings change. So be with us tonight for celebration. And then immediately after celebration, there'll be an opportunity to hear from one of our artists as well here at Festival Live. So do stay with us straight after celebration for Festival Live. Otherwise, enjoy the rest of your day. I hope it's sunny where you are. I hope somebody has brought you an ice cream, because I've had an ice cream as we've talked. That's been great. Okay, Mercedes-Benz by tomorrow morning would be really helpful. Enjoy the rest of your day, and we'll see you at celebration later. God bless.